All right, so we are here with Marco Sánchez for the Humanities Collaborative at El Paso Community College and the University of Texas at El Paso. Marco, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So we're going to be going through a list of questions that I already sent you. And I don't know if this is happening on your end, Marco, but my screen is frozen here. Is yours frozen?
No, I see you fine. Maybe it was after you hit recording that it started acting up.
Okay, yeah, I guess it was just a lag in that. Okay, now I see you moving. Cool.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, like I said, no worries. We'll take care of all this in editing, especially since I like to curse a lot. So
yeah,
one of the things I told myself I was going to stop cursing so much.
Same here, man.
I read a study somewhere that said that extremely intelligent people curse frequently.
Yeah, I heard that too. I saw that.
I agree with that. All right, cool. So I sent you this list of questions, and it was kind of a condensed list. Sandra, Vanessa, Suniga, and I, Mauricio Rodríguex, worked on these questions, and we felt that this was a great starting point to talk about, well, our general project, which focuses on art from the borderlands and talking about the sensibilities, obviously the politics, the personal influences, the aesthetics, everything that we can possibly talk about art, the visual arts. But the interest and the focus that we're taking is looking at artists working from this region of the world, which is the El Paso, Juarez, Las Cruces area, far West Texas. So far West Texas that we're not in Texas anymore, baby, I like to say. And of course, northern Mexico, the Frontera, which is also a very controversial area of the world as well. Again, so far north from the most densely populated areas of Mexico that it's not really considered to be, Mexicano anymore, right? And we deal with that kind of conflict of identity here in Texas, or as people say, Texas, right? Also, of course, we're right adjacent to the southern tip of Nuevo Mexico, New Mexico, to our English-speaking friends. Again, another community that is also detached from the next major metroplex. So we're in this geographical basin for those of us who don't really know the area. We're at the bottom of a bowl surrounded by these mountainous regions, literally if you envision a bowl. So we are geographically and biologically isolated from the rest of our states, of our countries, of our communities. And so that creates a very distinct kind of perspective of ourselves and obviously of our world. So positionality comes into our discussions often. But I think what's interesting is what we're going to be talking about in your art and your interest and your education and your passions, and obviously my interest in you as an artist in your work. I don't have a plan for these questions. They were, listed in chronology, but we can start wherever you want. There was a question a little bit further down on my list.
Mm-hmm.
That ask, a little bit about your background, but why don't you tell us, who you are, kind of a brief biography, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, you know me, but I guess for those that don't, my name is Marco Sánchez, Marco Antonio Sánchez. I never go by my middle name. And I'm originally, again, from the border, fronterizo, born in Ciudad Juarez and moved here to El Paso when I was 11, about to turn 12. Learned, I was in ESL, so went through the process of learning English and I don't know. I don't know if this is something that needs to be said within like our conversation today, but I'm gonna say it anyway. It was definitely a strange time when I moved from Juarez here because I was a big source of bullying because of being from Juarez, and primarily was from like other Chicanos, other like Mexican American people. And they're like, oh, like he's an ESL and he's from Juarez, es Juareño, Juareño, and it's Juarense, but that derogatory like term, like Juareño, and it was always weird to me that it was like, hey, you look just like me. Like, what is your problem with me? Um, so for a while, I guess I sort of had an issue with the term Chicano because these Chicanos bullied me more so than like the white people. But that started changing as I started developing as an artist. But again, that was maybe not necessary for this conversation. Um, so finished ESL. It was strange. I was in ESL for 3 months in sixth grade, all of seventh grade, and then my first month of eighth grade thrown into regular classes and a couple AP classes, AP Math and AP Science, and I didn't want to go. I didn't have all my Mexican friends, my raza. It was mostly white people, and it was weird. But did high school, did a semester at community college, and then did a whole lot of nothing for a while. Until I started backpacking and traveling and met up with my grandfather in Michoacan, who was a painter and a printmaker. And that's what led me into wanting to pursue a career in the arts. His artwork was ever present here at our house and at my tia's houses, and maybe because it was always present, it kind of became invisible. That I didn't pay much attention to it until somebody, pointed out a piece. I was like, oh yeah, that's my grandfather's piece, and so is this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And it was again after a backpacking trip that I visited him in Michoacan, and not really ever seeing him actually working in his studio. I would always see his work finished, but never see him working in his studio. That sparked that interest, and that's when I decided to go, to UTEP and pursue my BFA, and I got that in painting and printmaking. And then soon after that, I decided, like not even a year after that, I took a year break, just working in a couple studios, and decided to go to grad school. And here I am, graduated during the pandemic in 2020, and trying to, make work that's important to me, and um, that sort of shows my community and what we're about, what I'm about, and hopefully just embodies the people that I care about. So that was brief.
Yeah, you cover some really some really intense topics right there.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've never spoken about, that first part anyway.
So yeah, I know a little bit about your background and well, from our relationship. I was reflecting about that the other day and how you and I came to meet, and that I call it a cold call, and this is dating myself for people viewing this interview. Back in the day, we had telephones connected to the walls, and so we would pick these things up and call people. We called them cold calls because we didn't really know them. We didn't have these kind of social networks where we could reach out and touch people and then, make these kind of connections. But that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
I'd seen one of your pieces that Juan Sandoval, one of our friends, may he rest in peace, former University of Texas El Paso librarian, a major contributor to the art world, probably one of the most important art collectors in my understanding, my experience in general in this country. More specifically, one of the most important brown artist collector that I know. Most people would readily recognize another major art collector's name, Richard Marin, Cheech Marin, as he's known artistically. But Juan's approach to art was from a very intellectual, a very academic point of view, and without the resources of most collectors who get into, well, collecting have available, right? He just didn't have that kind of disposable income. But Juan's passion and his ability to recognize talent and importance is what led me to reach out to you. And I don't know how I came across one of your emails. I don't know if you shared it with me, but I remember reaching out to you and you responded. And I think you were actually in town. It was a coincidence. You were in town and you were available to drop off one of your pieces that I was interested in. And and it just so happens that your parents, don't live too far away from my home. And so, yeah, that's how we first met, which was kind of, well, it was fortuitous. And I think about that, and I think about the direction that my interests have gone and how deliberate they are. All of the pieces that we love and we enjoy and that we share with people have been, well, a part of our life because of a very, very concerted effort. It hasn't just happened. We haven't walked into gallery spaces, which we've tried, and you know about this. These commercial galleries where they house your work and other artists' work. They're obviously the middle person in that process. It's very off-putting to most people. So it's not a museum. It's a commercial enterprise. It's for profit. And so you walk in and you see something you like, and then you see the price tag, and it's just like that sticker shock, and that kind of puts people off. And then they start making assumptions and forming opinions, and that completely, well, it's a departure. It completely dishonors what we are interested in, and that kind of dissuaded us at first when we started looking into what was important to us. But we found a different approaches, which is how you and I met. And I'm so very, I don't know, I guess this is probably not the word I want to use, but tickled by that. Right. I like that relationship that we have, and the fact that I have connected since then. And obviously I'm a huge fan of what you do, and so thoroughly impressed by your work and your technique. And one of the things that I really admire about you as a person, as an artist, as a creator, beyond your training, is your affect, your presence in your work, which is, and I don't say this in a dismissive way at all, and I want people to maybe look up this word when you have time, but the humility that you bring to your craft is what really matters to us. And so we look at the people that we share space with where we live, and the people that we bring into our space are people who demonstrate that quality. It's that humility, but it's that humility with a level of genius that that we don't see with other artists. They may have the technique, they may have the training, the talent, but they're inaccessible. And we see that as a problem with art in general, but more specifically with some of the artists that we admire, that we absolutely wish we could have in our collection. But we'll talk about those later on. And I really want you to talk a little bit more about yourself, because I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. You're an amazing artist, and I want you to talk a little bit more about your identity. So you're Mexicano, I'm Mexicano, so we had that connection. It's one of the things I love about you, and your affinity for, well, your subject matter. And so you can start there and just take it to wherever you want.
All right. Yeah, so, well, yeah, Mexicano. I know you and I have had the conversation about like what is Chicano and am I one, and the question that a lot of people ask, and of course identity. And again, right, the short intro that I gave about me having my first bullying, or a lot of bullying, and it was by Chicano. So I don't know, I guess I had an issue with that term for a while because of that. And but fronterizo is the first thing that I call myself, Mexicano instead of Mexican. I usually say Mexicano, and then fronterizo, and a term that both two artists who you also collect, and they're colleagues and friends of mine, and they were professors of mine, Manuel Guerra and Francisco Delgado, who will be part of your interview. They both call themselves, I believe, they both use the term chuqueños, instead of like, we're from here, we're from Mexicanos, we're from El Paso, and beyond fronterizos, it's like chuqueño, instead of like El Paso. And I think the term alone, chuqueño, has a lot to say because of how you were describing the area that we are. We're in a border, we're encased in a bowl, and I often describe the bowl that we're in, not in the way that you did. And it's silly the reason why I describe it. I describe it because of my allergies and how bad my allergies get. And it's like, well, we're in a bowl, we're at the bottom of a bowl, and it's not just dust and pollen. It's like heavy metals that are also in the air from all the cars, the vehicles, and the refineries. And so that's my reason, the way that I explain a bowl. But I digress. So I don't know, my identity, I don't question it much anymore. I'm, fronterizo, Mexicano, I'm Chuqueño, I'm Chicano, all hand in hand. I think they all go hand in hand, and I don't question it. I don't anymore. After going to grad school and living in Pennsylvania for 3 years, I had to sort of explain that time and time and time again. And I realized that to me, it's not my identity in that sense isn't important anymore, because I don't have to explain to people. I do and I don't, but I don't have to, after you repeat yourself to the same person over and over and they still don't get it, it's like, man, like you're just helpless, and I'm just going to move on and go with other people and just share my experiences and my perspectives with other people, and people who actually, give a damn. And we're all here to learn about each other and just care about each other, despite of our identities or our backgrounds or our heritage. So I might say I don't question it anymore. I know I do a little bit, but I'm more confident in that it's like I'm Chuqueño, I'm Mexicano, I'm from the border, man. And this, I think we kind of maybe like relate in that sense too, because if I'm not mistaken, you were also born in Juarez, right?
I was born in a village.
In Chihuahua. Sorry, yeah. Yes, in Chihuahua. So not in Juarez, but the Chicanos there. And I think that's another thing that I've been learning from our conversations, that I sit and I listen and take it in, and it's like, yeah, maybe I am, because I used to say like, no, I'm Mexicano and my artwork isn't Chicano artwork. I'm Mexicano living and working in the U.S. primarily, even though we do work in Mexico also. And I used to say like, no, it goes hand in hand, but no, it's right there. It's synonymous. It's a symbiotic relationship, and yeah.
So obviously, identity is a very complicated issue. It's one of the things that I look at, especially in terms of our art, and whenever we talk about art in general, I usually have to explain to people, well, we only collect brown artists, and that always seems to be kind of either a jumping point to continue the conversation, or it's like a dead end. Mm-hmm. That kind of just disinterests people. And again, we could probably have a different conversation and interview about the perception of art and what is art. And I remember a colleague of mine talking to me about the issues with the phrase fine art, and you and I have talked about this as well. and what comes from that kind of perception. And I totally get that. And I think one of the reasons that I understood those issues was because I wasn't a part of that paradigm. Again, being impoverished, being an immigrant and undocumented person here in the U.S., never having that exposure, never understanding what anesthetic was and what it meant to, our species. I didn't have to work within those constraints. So to me, art was just something that we, experienced without any sort of, politic connected. Now, clearly that developed as I became much more educated and then hyper educated. The exposures to these systems, to these programs, to these institutions where we are being directed to look at things through very specific lenses, that's when I became aware. It's like, oh, okay, whatever my identity is, I'm using that to look at these, these pieces of work. And so one of the things that I became immediately curious about is, how art is valued or not valued, and then looking at to the level of work that goes into it. And so my interest in this project and developing relationships with you and so many other friends is talking about your process. And so unfortunately, you've been, victim to my inquiry and, ad nauseum, questions about your process, and talk to me about the minutia, very detailed. I love that stuff. And I really, really think that it's what needs to be talked about in terms of your work, because whereas most people may not be familiar with the physical process, the activity of doing what you do, I think a lot of us can appreciate that, because it is a labor that, yes, is a result of your mechanics, your body doing something. But then there's also that intellectual aspect of it, which I think is off-putting and in a lot of ways threatening to a lot of viewers. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by art, because kind of like poetry, which is another part of my life as a writer, people are intimidated by it because they think, it's elevated, it's beyond my scope of understanding, but it's not. And we can talk about it in so many different ways. And this is one of the things I respect so much of what you do, and I wish that others could do. And probably there are so many people who are inherently talented, or just never encouraged to do this or given the opportunity. That's another project unto itself. But I just want, I want to ask you the next question. One of the things that I'm interested in, that I want you to talk about, that a lot of people would definitely benefit from hearing from you, is the discussion of printmaking. Like, what is a print? And using that term, print, and then making sure that everybody understands we're not talking about what comes out of a Brother desktop printer, or what you send Wi-Fi to whatever workstation. We're talking about something that is very unique, something that is not, I think, at all understood by, I would say, the mass art consumer market. Printmaking, and I had to learn about this. I was completely ignorant. I was completely unaware of what is involved in printmaking, and so many of the different subsects and the techniques and the materials and the processes, which again, we can nerd out for hours about this. But if you could just describe, I'm looking at the official question here is, and it's an unfair question now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it, it's an unfair question. Can you describe printmaking, Marcos?
Yeah, well, I guess the easiest way to describe it is, you already sort of did that. It's not a print that you send like to your brother printer. It's not a print that you get from Kinko's. It's not something done by a machine without a human hand. You know, a print has to have a human hand, whether it's setting type, like with the Gutenberg press, which was the first press that was invented in the 1400s, I believe it was 1440, by Gutenberg himself. So a German is where the press originated. And the first book that was published was, of course, the Bible. So, you know, printmaking, setting letter type. So that's one type of printing. Another thing is when you know, if you talk to somebody about hey, they ask you, what do you do? And the answer is, I'm a printmaker. So the response is, oh, you print shirts. And no, you know, the answer is it's no, not necessarily. It's a very minute aspect that can be done. And some printmakers do shirts, and I've done a few, but it's definitely not the main focus of my practice. There's also, I guess, like very giant, elaborate stamp making. If you think of the stamps, whether it's for like a date, you know, we make carvings, whether they're out of wood, out of linoleum, or other soft materials like MDF board, and some other plastics. And you're essentially just making, you know, different size stamps, and that can be multiple colored by using multiple, I guess, matrices, different blocks, or they could be single color, which I typically work in, and I have been doing a few more colorful stuff and adding more color. And then there's etchings, which, if you think of money, if you think about, you know, like the US currency, a lot of that stuff's done by, you know, engravings, and you see the line work, and that's engravings. Our coins are engravings that are done at the mint, and those are done by people who typically are trained in printmaking and really in engraving, which is different than what I do. I've never done any engravings myself. I've done etchings, which that is done chemically with acids, and engraving, you're physically pushing metal and you're carving metal out and you're pushing metal around. So complicated way of saying I make reproducible images from a matrix, and everything is handmade. For the most part, there's a lot of people with new emerging technologies, digital printers, or not digital printers, I'm sorry, laser cutters, laser engravers, that if you have a file, you do something hand-drawn, you can scan it, shoot it to that, and then the engraver, you know, does all the work for you. Then you can roll that up, and that will act as a stamp itself. But I guess the easiest way is we make stamps out of relief prints, so a type of carving, or etchings, which are typically made with copper, zinc. There's some places doing aluminum, and I'm sure they're using steel. I believe in Oaxaca we've used steel before. So various metals that are susceptible to different types of acid. And that's the easiest way that I can describe it.
Wow. So prints or stamps. Yeah. I would definitely not use that term myself. My gosh, looking at part of your processes, those things that you all as artists have allowed me into your space, your workspace, to witness. Mm-hmm. And again, we could nerd out for hours over this. It's not as easy as you're describing it at all. And there's one thing that my wife Margie and I always reflect on, is a comment that you made to us earlier on when we first met. Is well, what you do is astonishing, and what you talk about in terms of your artistic talent, and you can't teach talent. What you have is something that is inherent, and then you can then take and finesse, and then educate, and then direct, and then refine, or I can't really think of the correct or the appropriate adjective to describe what it is that we do with what you bring already. that is natural. Your aversion to rendering is it's a funny thing to us. So we talk about that. It's like you talk and complain about rendering, drawing as being this kind of rote process and something that's tedious to you, or just in astonishment. And like we look at your sketches and think, wow, if we can draw a symmetrical stick figure, we're that much ahead of the game. Your ability is something that we're in awe of, and
you know what?
It shouldn't be diminished or denigrated in any way, even by you. So we're telling you right now, it's amazing what you possess and what you've been willing to work at and then share with all of us. That's just like it's.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I know that Pancho. I know that one of your people that are also part of this interview process is. Yeah, he'll probably if he hears this or he watches this, he's gonna either grill me about it or make fun of me about it. And I have other friends and colleagues who are also printmakers, and they give me so much grief. They're like, "What the hell do you mean you don't like to render?" And they're like, "You're halfway there, man. Keep going." All right. And they'll poke at it. They'll definitely poke at it. So yeah, we'll see.
Can we get an official, on the record explanation of what your issues are with rendering?
Okay, so I don't know. Maybe I feel like I'm not that good at it. When we met and this was the first things that I told you. I believe I followed that up with I make drawings to make prints or to make paintings, but never to finish a drawing. They're mostly studies. I like to call them studies because I never finish them, and the question of how do you know a drawing or a painting is finished, I don't know. I just feel like they're never finished. I don't know. There's just something that I don't enjoy. I guess I don't enjoy within my own hand. I've been enjoying it more so. I will say that I have been enjoying drawing more, but rendering fully, like how people try and do, whether it's photorealism, I don't know. I don't like it. My type of rendering, I think, is heavily dictated on line work, versus as opposed to like value, like highlights and shadows. I hate to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but I do like my line work when I draw. And it's pretty different than a lot of other people. When I look at Francisco Delgado's and Manny Guerra's drawing technique, I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, like how can I draw like these guys? Not how can I draw, but it's like, man, these guys draw amazing. Like I draw this way, but I still like the way that I draw. But on the record, I don't know, like to render something fully as somebody in academia, like a formalist would like to do, would ask me to do. No. And maybe it's my aversion to full on formal and the formalities of paint and draw exactly what you see, even though I work from pictures. But I think that's part of it. Yeah, and I think that's where I'm gonna end with that. I don't like strictly formal things, and I think rendering to me seems like an entire formality that I'm trying to avoid.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I think one of the aspects of your work that drew me or caught my attention immediately to you was that your level of precision, which is something I love that aspect of anything visual, is that level of precision. And I remember in that first piece I saw that inspired me to reach out to you. And one of the things I was thinking about for our interview today was, having one of your pieces mounted behind me. I'm like, I don't have the time to do it justice. And I know you've noticed this, and this is on the record. I'm going to admit this. So one of the things that I've delayed in doing is putting together all the frames for your work. And that's because I don't want to do it piecemeal, and I want to do it as one big project, which is a problem because you keep producing and we keep acquiring.
Yeah.
And
I know.
so, yeah, it's one of those problems, right? But the line work from, and I'm not even going to try to describe it on video here, but the line work from that piece of the cart and the, I guess you can call them, I guess, guy wires, or these pieces of string or cord or wire, whatever they were, holding this umbrella above this mobile taco cart. You capture that in a way that my eye was immediately drawn. The symmetry was there. And you were talking about value. And again, your humility is just far beyond my capability. The value there, everything there was just perfect. I mean, there's a reason why that piece exists. And I saw it, and we're there. And the subject matter, which is a part of the next question, is what this project is really based on, is that sensibility, that aesthetic, what it is that you can help us understand about your work from this position as an artist, as a member of this region of the world, which is a very special region. I need to talk about this very briefly. So we are unique. We are the largest bicultural, binational, bilingual community on the planet of the Earth right now. So we're unique in that aspect. Yes, there are other communities like us, but they're not us. One, because of the size, the scope, the movement. We are a way station for a lot of our community members. And so that in and of itself creates a very distinct sensibility. And so the art that's being produced here, and one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about, one of the things I see you being passionate about, is that perspective of the world, not just our world, but of the world that is from this area, which is not like any other area in the southern U.S., northern, Mexico border. So we have San Diego, Tijuana, which is loosely connected, right? Because of urban expansion. Now we see, neighbors looking at each other from their bedroom windows, right? We have Laredo, we have Brownsville, we have South Texas. Sure, we have that border community, but they're up and coming. We've been here for quite some time. We were already here when the border crossed us. We didn't cross it. And so we're looking at the world from a place of origin, whereas those other border regions are not looking at the world from a place of origin. We are. And so my artists, you, Pancho, Francisco, everyone else that we love to share our world with, they're coming at us, at everyone else, from a platform that no other artist can speak from. And even though we have other brown artists, other Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx artists, no one can speak from this area, which I don't want to get too emotional about this, but it's a very beautiful place. It's a very special place. So can you talk a little bit about that sensibility?
Can you rephrase that one more time? Because you can you rephrase that, please? Just to end.
So can you talk a little bit about that sensibility?
That's ringing for me, I think.
This will be edited. Okay, fine. Yeah, the dog got curious and excited. So okay, so you, Marcos, can you talk a little bit about your sensibility producing your work from this region of the planet, of the world, of our community? And you can frame it however you want, but I want you to talk about it as being, well, one, a brown person, a brown male person, which you identify as male, right?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, in producing your work and studying your work and being influenced by everything else, it's a very broad question. I know I'm not helping you out here, but
no, you're good. It did help. Yeah, if you want, I can kind of chime in. Well, a lot of it, I think as of right now, I think it depends on the series and the issues that I'm working on, and or trying to illustrate or just kind of bring attention to. Um, a few pieces, some of them you have, and then some of them you don't, but they all usually stem from social issues, and some of them are from either this region or just, again, the immigrant identity. Um, and one of them, I will say that one of my last pieces that I did for my thesis that you do have is, that it's a mixed media one, and it's that woodcut of the border wall, and then that shaped copper plate etching of me sort of on free fall. And that one was when I was in the application of my citizenship. I had been a resident of the United States for the past, I got it last year, so I was 36. So I'd been a resident of the U.S. for 29 years, and hadn't gone through the process of getting my citizenship, and um, it was because of the last administration that I decided, like, no, I need to become a U.S. citizen so I can vote this person out, so I can help vote this person out. And that was sort of that piece in particular, a sort of like limbo, and feeling in a bit of limbo, and but also fortunate of living in a region like this, um, because it's sort of like a lottery, and it is fairly easy for people in Juarez to become American citizens or residents, and then that can lead to citizenship. Um, and it was kind of like a lottery post like the 1920s or 1930s. I don't remember the exact date that the Rio Grande or the Rio Bravo was cemented. Um, and like you said, we didn't cross the border crossed us, because when that happened, when they did cement, as you know, they did cement the river. People on both ends, people who got stuck in Mexico, who were American born and lived in America, and same thing for Mexicans who were what is now the U.S. So I don't know, and hence the title of the piece, Heads or Tails, un volado en la línea. It's sort of like the luck of the draw. Flip a coin and see where you land. Um, and that's kind of how I felt about my citizenship application. It's like, well, it's a flip. Am I going to get it? Am I not? And it felt like it took forever, but it was honestly the easier route. There's so many people that had to apply from zero, and I was already a resident. My father was a U.S. citizen. He was born here. So I had all these things going in my favor, but I felt like anything could have gone wrong, and then I couldn't get the citizenship. So I don't know. I think that's an issue that was always on my mind, and that it's very like regional, and it's very site specific. But then again, I work with site-specific issues. One of them being, well, not violence against women, because that's a world issue, that's a universal issue. But Juarez, as you know, and I'm sure most of the people that are going to see this or listen to this, they might not know that Juarez is as painful as it is and as shameful as it is. It's like the capital of femicides in the world, or at least it was for about 8 years running. So a triptych that I did, that I still don't think you've seen that, or in person anyway, that piece was in essence because of that specific issue. And there had just been a killing of a young artist and activist, Isabela Cabanillas. So that was part of it. And just how many friends I have, and we all have female friends that have experienced sexual assault. We had just seen Brock Turner, and then there was Kavanaugh. And then I have a cousin who's also been a victim of sexual assault. And so I don't know, that's kind of what sparked that piece. So a lot of it is, I like to think of the region and social issues and stuff that happens here. But I think that they can also sort of not necessarily be universal, but be of both of our cultures, like the Chicano culture, the Mexican American culture, the Mexican culture as well.
So you mentioned, a very important topic and a widely overlooked topic of the feminicides happening. We, I think, can safely assume are continue to happen in our community for no other reason other than the patriarchy that exists in Mexico and obviously the U.S. But it's things like that, and as you were talking about that, I'm imagining a lot of the artists that work on the Frontera, and they incorporate these issues into their imagery. We carry that, but most people are unaware, and obviously atrocities abound worldwide. It doesn't necessarily make us unique. However, it does in the respect that, well, we've chosen to turn a blind eye to these things, much like every other issue here on the border, right? And those issues that carry political capital, we shine the light on. But I think that's where art comes into play in terms of what we deem to be important, and in sharing with people. We have pieces that are very personal to many viewers, but we also have pieces that, you know, speak to a more general audience, and I think most people can understand and appreciate what is, well, being discussed. This is the border. This is a militarized zone. It's been a militarized zone for as long as you and I have been alive. We don't know it to be any different. We've seen and heard what people say about where we live, most of which is not accurate, most of which does not at all give credence to the people that live here, let alone importance. So we're not even talking about elevating any of this subject matter. We're talking about just recognizing its place, you know, in the world, which is what you do, which is what's fascinating. And you mentioned that one piece, which is one of my favorites, and I just keep imagining, you know, how it's going to be presented. The wall. What's the term that we use? Bollards? Is it BOLLARDS? Bollards, those big square pipes with the points and the shape of bollards, right?
Yeah.
Bollards.
So.
So you have those bollards in the background, and then you have the copper etching of you coming over, and then there's the issue of your footwear, which is something that has been documented and discussed. People don't even stop to think about, okay, well, if you've ever been unfortunate enough to be arrested and processed in this country, then you probably know that if you go in with shoelaces, you're forced to surrender your shoelaces, right? And so you're walking around in holding cells with shoes and no laces, which means you basically have flip-flops, right? Yeah. Which is awkward, and that's another issue. But there's the issue of people who are crossing our border for a long list of reasons, humanitarian reasons, strictly humanitarian reasons, and they don't have shoes. They've lost them, they've worn out. They've been running and they've fallen off, or we often find shoes when we're strolling out in the desert, and these are not the kind of images that we may have seen in popularized urban images here in the US, where we see shoes dangling from a power line or a telephone on an elevated utility pole line. Now, these are shoes that were abandoned in the desert for reasons that that we don't discuss. And so this picture has you with one shoe on, unlaced, and missing the other shoe. And it's a detail that I appreciate that most viewers would look at, maybe notice, but not really stop to think about. But it's that sensibility. And that sensibility can only come from someone here in our area of the world. And I keep wanting to use the word border, but that term to me is clearly politicized. But from our place in the world, and so many other cultures, many other peoples can identify with this idea of, well, what we put on our feet, and when do we do that? At what point in our life do we put on our first shoes? And you and I share the same experience where shoes were ancillary to our daily life. They were in a lot of ways a hindrance to our childhood. We didn't want to wear shoes. They got in the way of what we wanted to do for the most part. But that imagery is stark, is telling, but it is nuanced in a way that only...
I'm not wearing shoes right now.
You're not wearing shoes.
I'm an adult and I still don't want those shoes.
And yeah, that's another project, right? Talking about our choice in footwear, or our ability to choose, our ability to choose footwear,
right?
And making those decisions.
I apologize for doing
that. No, that's awesome. No, thanks for doing that. At this point, is there?
Can I interject a little bit and sort of add to that, the no shoe and what we were talking about, and if I may, can I pitch a name? So there's an anthropologist who I found a book. It was titled "Land of Open Graves," and it's by Jason de Leon. He was an anthropologist, an archaeologist, and he's from Texas, somewhere in the valley. I don't remember if it's like Laredo or McAllen, or it's that area. And the book is, I don't want to misspeak and misquote, but I believe it's the first actual book written in a with a very scientific approach, both archaeologically and anthropologically, the way that they catalog findings in the desert, and a lot of it was shoes. He also had an installation. He's had multiple installations in museums where he they gather certain materials and equipment and clothing accessories that migrants carry with them in their pilgrimage across primarily the Sonoran Desert, which is the only part of the border that isn't militarized because of the extreme temperatures. And he's created several installations, and many artists have done this with shoes, and we've seen it with Red Woman's shoes, but his just sort of struck different because it hits home. It's stuff that we see here all the time, and it's stuff that we might know people that went through that process, through that pilgrimage, whether it's crossing in the desert or through tunnels or another way. And that is partly the reason why I did that piece without a shoe, just from reading reading that book and findings of shoes, of wallets, and miscellaneous. There's one story that I'm trying to remember, but I don't remember the full details, so I don't want to talk about it. But it's a great book, and again, reading his stuff and just seeing what these migrants do and what they leave behind and what they bring with them, and shrines that are put together in known rest areas throughout the desert in both Mexico and in the U.S., before the crossing and after. And the shoe thing is always very important because there's a lore of, you don't want to leave footprints. So one thing that they do, that certain migrants do, is they put a carpet just regular carpet on the bottom of their shoes, so they're not leaving like shoe prints. And I don't know if you knew that or not.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, and that's part of it that's in that book. And he has a great TED talk also, which I mean, just think it, look at his name and the TED talk, and it's, it's great and it's heartbreaking. And I know I laughed at about, when we were talking about the shoe, because I don't know, in a sense to me, it's funny because I never have one. I'm always missing one shoe regardless too. But like the reality is that the motive for me to doing that was a conscious decision of sort of shining a light to these issues and that the migrants go through in their pilgrimage that I saw in Jason De Leon's work. So.
And I could not name the artist who did one of those pieces, but I think he collected, or she collected, they collected confiscated shoelaces by the Border Patrol from all the immigrants that they were processing, and so I have no idea how they came across these remnants, but it was just bags and bags full of shoelaces that were taken from these detainees. And of course, other articles from their persons, to include any IDs, anything that could be made into a weapon, so on and so forth. Hearing stories from a lot of these asylum seekers, and I don't want to take off on a tangent, but Margie and I work with groups that help place a lot of our asylum seekers, and they share these stories about las hieleras, the freezers. They house so many asylum seekers and so many detainees in these warehouses that are kept at, they're meat lockers is what they are. That is the level, the temperature that they maintain in these spaces, and the atrocities that are being committed against them, and the shoelaces. Whenever we picked up our travelers, we noticed they're all wearing new shoes, and of course these are donated by so many of our humanitarian groups in the area. And one of the things that we always take note of is they're all wearing new shoes, and why they're wearing new shoes. Well, they come out of these detention centers without shoes. Why is that? Well, it's because Homeland Security is confiscating all of these things. Wow. So these details, and it's not a trivial point, and in thinking about how we kind of compile these questions, this really is kind of like the heart of the project. Is you capture these images, you capture the real politics of what is occurring here and what is being presented and what is being preserved, and hopefully through not just individual efforts, but we want to make this a group effort for the sharing of this knowledge, this graphic knowledge, which should then be also documented in other ways with the general public, the world, or in perpetuity. We also have to ask what your own influences are. Why did you choose this particular direction? Whenever we talk to people about their professions, especially in this country, we always tie it to, affluence, ambition, dollar cents, right? But to people like you, to people like me, to people that we love and respect and we associate with, that's not the end goal. We look at things that give us pleasure in other ways, but we also have to reflect on what kind of pushed us in that direction. And so you definitely mentioned your influences earlier on in talking about your grandfather, but I want you to talk a little bit more formally about that influence.
Sure.
One of the questions was, what were some of your formal, I guess, influencers or your motivations to taking this on as a profession? Obviously, your grandfather is a very, very important part of this discussion, but what can you share with us about that?
Okay. So yeah, after, my grandfather, I decided to research both El Paso, UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, and New Mexico State University in Las Cruces. And I went and checked out both studios, and I wanted to do painting because of my grandfather, and I wanted to do anthropology. So I actually started as a painting and anthropology major.
What was your grandfather's name?
Guillermo Cordero.
Okay.
And I wanted to do anthropology because I figured, hell, like I've been traveling and I've been backpacking quite a bit, and I love learning about cultures, both the physical aspect and the cultural aspect of it, and the artistic process that comes with it too, like their music and how music's evolved both there and here, and how we've all been influenced by different regions and different people. And I don't know, I didn't see much from Las Cruces, New Mexico, from NMSU, that I don't know, I wasn't too thrilled, or it was more conceptual work, and my work has always been more figurative and more representational. That I saw that at UTEP, and I said, no, this is where I'll go. And then I had one painting professor, and his name was Jim Quinnen. I only had him for one semester, and then he left. And then in came Francisco Delgado, who I had throughout most of my painting career there, except for my last painting course. But he was a big, huge influence on my work after that, and always in my ear. And I loved the work that he was doing, and just saw the Chicano work. And I always thought Chicano work was sort of different, but there was a lot more narrative than, I guess, the traditional, what we normally think of, like Mexican work or Chicano work, or like luchadores and this and that. And yes, he does paint a lot of those, or Villa or Zapata, or Frida Kahlo. And he'll paint some of those figures, but there's so much more to them. They're involved in social issues, and they're wrestling with the Statue of Liberty, and then Porky the Pig, and just, it just kind of threw me to, I didn't know exactly what to think of it, because when I did start my formal education, I wasn't aware of a lot of the artwork and a lot of the contemporary artists. I thought art was, Frida Kahlo and the Da Vinci's and the Picassos and the Van Gogh, what's more popular, I guess, the artists that are more known. But then there's just so much more, so many artists that aren't as known, or contemporaries. Unfortunately, that's changed because of social medias as well, and just being able to, like you said, cold call somebody instead of having to go to a gallery and trying to find out who's representing this artist, which I don't want to do that. I'd never want to do that. So Francisco Delgado was a big one. He was like my first big influence after my grandfather. Of course, this was when I was a painting and an anthropology major. And then I came and I took printmaking, my first print course, and I had heard some of these terms because of my grandfather, but never really understood. I was just said, yeah, oh yeah, of course, yes. Okay, yeah. And it wasn't until I got to touch a copper plate and make it an entire mess. It was, what the hell was I doing? I believe my first copper plate, my first etching was it was a beaver skull that I had, a beaver skull. So I was like, okay, beaver skull. But then doing lithography and doing relief prints and doing screen printing, and it just blew my mind, and it just kind of put painting on the back burner. And my professor for that was Kim Bauer, and again, second biggest influence in my life after my grandfather. First would be Francisco, and then Kim Bauer. And then, just learning more and researching more, I came across, the further I dove into printmaking, I came across a lot of the Mexican artists, primarily like the artists that Leopoldo Méndez, who was one of the founders of Taller de Gráfica Popular in Mexico in 1937. And he is by far, I would like to say, probably my favorite printmaker, followed by Albert Dürer. But just his line work and his sensibilities and the storytelling, his narratives behind his work were beautiful. And he was highlighting a lot of the atrocities that happened throughout the Mexican Revolution. So they're very striking images, and I remember briefly like seeing them around. I don't exactly remember where, but Leopoldo Méndez definitely shifted my perspective and also my narratives. Leopoldo Méndez, along with the political climate that we were going through 4 years ago until today, 4 or 5 years ago until today.
Can you talk a little bit in detail about that? Mendez's influence on you and your correlation to the 4 years, 2016, 2020.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, can I ask you for a favor? Can we pause for 1 minute?
Yes.
Yeah, so let's take a little. I gotta take a break.
You know what?
I gotta go to the bathroom. So.
All right. Yeah, me too. Actually, I'll be right back.
We'll be back.
All right. I needed to get another water too. Topo. Just being out in that sun, man, it killed me.
I know this.
Pretty warm, man, and it was right on top. I was wearing a hat. Out there for just like 2 hours, but it's blaring. You know, if you just stand there without moving too much, any shade, it's hot. I feel like my brain was definitely fried for a bit.
I know, as a precursor to our summer, I don't think we're gonna. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna do too well this summer. It's gonna be hotter than last year's.
Yep.
But anyhow, so back into it, man. I know this. I'm thinking about. I thought 15 questions was like not enough, and I'm like, oh geez, this is like probably too much because we can blend a lot of these, but at the same time, I want to know more about, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing conversations that you had with your family, with your grandfather about art, its utility, its production, the subject matter, a lot of the what ifs, just those kind of discussions that we have, which to most of us seem transitory, right, in our daily life, but really become part of our fabric and do push us in a very specific direction in terms of our ultimate life goals or life paths. So can you reflect a little bit, or do you want to reflect a little bit about, your grandfather and your family and art in general and what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, I don't know how to go about that because I guess I was barely getting into my practice more and spending more time with my grandfather, and partly because I was going to like Michoacan and Mexico City and Oaxaca and those places to make work and to sort of expand my community. So we were barely getting to talk more about that, and just sort of kick ideas at each other and just talk about each other's work in a more intellectual level, and me now understanding what he was doing as opposed to before, when I first started. Um, and that was again before he got sick with cancer, and then that kind of became the last year and a half of his life were pretty difficult. So we weren't able to have a lot of discussions in that sense. He also the cancer was in his throat, so he lost his vocal. They went in and they did surgery, and because of that, one of his vocal cords went, and so the last year was like fairly difficult in that sense that we would try and communicate, and it was just difficult for him, for everybody. But we got him a tablet so he couldn't communicate with us, and he hated it. He didn't want to do anything with it. So he had literally a chalkboard and notebooks. Because when he would try and talk and speak to you, just mouthing words, he would speak at his normal rate, and it was difficult to read his lips and to try and understand what he was mouthing for, I don't know, like 5 seconds. It's just like, papa, like slow down. So I'm not sure, how things would have differed had I know it would have been great had his health not deteriorated, and there would have been a lot more intellectual discussions to have with him, and just technical discussions, and sort of helped me continue like my formative, the aspect of my practice. So because I think my practice is still sort of developing, it's still raw in some areas and not in others. And I know that he would have probably helped me shape that a little bit different, but that's what I have my contemporaries for, and that's why I have like my colleagues and Francisco Delgado, and friends in Mexico and Querétaro, like the guys from La Madriguera Gráfica and other people who I've met throughout like conferences and again social media. So well, I think that is a really nice thing that we have right now, the direct access to artists. And if we're just sort of, I guess, brave enough to, kind of, again, cold call or send a message and say, hey, dude, really like your work. I want to invite you to be a part of this, or vice versa. That's how I've been invited to a couple of shows and a couple portfolios. And I don't know if that answered your question. I think I kind of went on a tangent.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about this? Well, in printmaking, collaboratives, and this is something that I'm still trying to fully engage with and understand, is what is a printmaking collaborative? What does it involve? Who is involved? A little bit about that.
So, yeah, collaboratives, a lot of the times a collaborative comes to be because our practice can get expensive. The equipment's expensive. Drying racks, presses, paper, rent for a space. It all gets expensive. So that's why a lot of the times a collaborative comes to be. Whereas opposed to like drawing or painting, you can do that basically anywhere. That's why people go and paint and draw outside, painting in plein air, because you can do it anywhere. And I think that's partly why I like the printmaking, our printmaking practice. It's a democratic practice that's readily available to most. It's easily to share as opposed to a painting. The nice thing about multiplicity, about editions, is that we can share those prints, and it's not just about collection, it's about a circulation. It's easier to circulate as opposed to a sculpture or a painting, where it's going to sit in a museum for, I don't know, 6 months, 3 months, a year and a half, 5 years. And you can have one image from, that one specific edition can be in 2 galleries and 1 museum and in 7 people's homes, and then some. So that's why collaboratives come to be. And as you know, we have really the only collaborative of the sort here in El Paso is Horn Toad Prints, which is run by Manny Guerra. And Horn Toad Prints is composed of Manuel Guerra, Francisco Delgado, and Raúl Monarres. And I had a little bit of time in there as well, more so like the past 2 or 3 years. I guess because of COVID and my last year in grad school, things just sort of slowed down. So I don't know how much work there is to be done or how much work has been getting done. And we had to put a pause on so many projects that I know Manny had to put pause on some projects. And I know he's got a couple more going, and which is nice because, that's what a community space is for. It's to have people and to be a collective and to make work and to share it with the community.
So there's a term that we keep using kind of loosely, and I guess assume that most people understand our definitions. The term work, to make work. What is work, and how do we honor work, especially when it comes to art and living in a capitalist society? pretty much a capitalist world, understanding that concept of commerce. How do we ascribe value to work? And this is one of the things that I became acutely aware of, as you did, at a very early age, in understanding what our abilities were with our hands and what we could produce. And then ascribing that term work to it because it then had a monetary value. And that's what most people in this world, well, in this country specifically, the US of A, think of when they hear the word work. And so when it comes to art, I believe that most consumers want to look at it as something as decorative, as something as transitory, as something that is not the same as, I don't know, a brick, if you will, that doesn't just naturally occur. However, when we look at a piece of art, which is the result of work, whether it is something like, I don't know, a sculpture, a painting, a print, a textile, a chord of music, I don't know. We don't necessarily understand how to assign an immediate and consistent value, which is another issue that we can then talk about. I don't think we would ever reach a consensus on how we should value work. I know how I believe we should value work. And I know how I really believe all of your work and all of our interested artists' work should be valued. But, you know, I'm preaching to the choir here, but can you talk to us a little bit about how you view, you know, a work product and its value?
That's a good question, and it's one that I haven't been able to have a definitive answer. Again, we were speaking earlier about a mural that I'm commissioned, me and another artist are commissioned to do, and you know, that is a little easier to, I guess, kind of gauge because there's a sort of consensus as to how much you charge per square foot, unless you're, I don't freaking know, Banksy or Finton McGee, the guy that they brought to paint that mural next to Montecillo, Australian artist. It's a strange thing. I had somebody at a coffee shop. You know, I take my blocks and I'll work or on either drawing it or carving it. And they were asking me, "Oh, you know, that's great. And what is this? And well, how much do you know? How much do you charge?" And you know, and it's subjective too, depending on the piece. I don't know. I don't know. I gauge my work by the type of print it is, whether it's a relief print, an etching, a screen print, a lithograph, or mixed media. So that's sort of how I gauge things. Also by size, if it's a full sheet, half sheet, quarter sheet, if it's multiple plates, if it's one plate. I think I personally have a sense of both the scale of the sheets, the scale of the block of my matrix, and if it's like a single, and then double or triple or multiple, and again whether it's a screen print, and what holds more value in a sense because of the materials that are used. The materials that are used, and then the time that is spent, and also the size of the edition. So I think that's the way that I gauge my stuff, and also my community, because I want my stuff to be accessible to those people in my community, because I know, again, thinking of our work and how much time it goes into it, right? Labor and knowledge, and I guess I hate to say expertise because I'm in no means an expert in this. I'm still learning and developing every day. I have grasped so many things of it, and I think I'm pretty dang good at it, but I'm by no means an expert. But like I know that some of the work could be priced a little higher. I know that if I went to Chicago or LA or New York or Philadelphia, St. Louis, I don't know, Austin, Dallas, I know that I can see the same type of quality work, same level career artist, or even lower and or higher, and it could be placed at a higher price. So I like to keep my work accessible to my community, even though at times it can seem a bit much. And then there's a bit of guilt that comes with it too. It's like, crap, am I charging too much? When I know how much time it also I put into the piece, So that's part of, I guess, what I think about that issue within our practice.
So it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's very
yeah. There's no like formula of like, okay, you're gonna, like with a mural, like, oh, you're gonna charge X amount per square foot, or you charge per hour. I know that in other practices, like in painting, they'll charge per square inch, or in metalsmiths, my roommate in grad school, she was a metalsmith, and they would charge for the material, and then they would charge per hour, and they would set their own, I guess, hourly rate. And depending on the material as well, like if they're using just brass or nickel or zinc versus somebody that's using higher end metals like silver or gold, and if they're doing like stone inlay, versus like just steel, the hourly rate might still be the same, but then here comes the materials, again, the hierarchy of that.
So yeah, things like that we can definitely quantify, right? Whatever the market value of those materials are. But you would, previous to this interview, have talked about this issue. We've had a conversation specifically about an artist who is now represented by a large East Coast agent and whose work now commands an astronomical price. And it's because of the notoriety, the attention that the artist has garnered. And we've talked about, well, I guess my approach to that conversation, and I remember thinking about how to broach the issue with you, because I don't know if you noticed about some of the conversations that you and I have had previously. I think long and hard about these topics before we actually, hook up and have a couple of beers and talk about your work. But I find that very troubling, not just from the access issue, which to me, access is really now important to me. Mm-hmm. So who is now able to view this? I would love to go spend a month at all of the Smithsonian's museums. I can't afford to do that. Most people can't afford to do that. And then to the back of the museums, oh my gosh. And then thinking about that and correlating to our own community, what we have available here and what we don't have access to. I still can't do that. But all right, so I mean, those are, I guess we can call them celebrity artists, right? And we can name celebrity artists and people would be like in awe. And I often think about going to these major national, international museums and seeing patrons taking selfies with these monumental popular pieces and wondering, well, what is that about? I don't get that, but I do. But then it also bothers me on other levels, like, well, what you do, your time, your effort, your expertise, your inherent talent, how do we value that, and how are we exposing that, and then how do we talk about that in its larger scope? And that's one of the things I'm also interested in, is how do we contextualize what you're doing graphically, visually, for our world, obviously our community, and what we want the world to know about our community, which is very unique. And even though there are a lot of reasons El Paso, Juarez, Las Cruces, this region, this topographical bowl should be on the world's radar, we're not. We often get overshadowed by other events, which may not even be at the same level in terms of their severity, but they still continue to happen. And I don't want to go into those things. That's another project altogether. But looking at the work that you do and bringing those issues to light and exposing them in such a beautiful way is what I deem to be valuable, not just to me personally, but to the world, and which is why I want to give it this kind of exposure. Your time, your work does have a value which we can place a number on, but that to me is insignificant. But at the same time, this is the way the world is quantifying and, again, assigning that, well, not value, importance. And this idea of restricting access to work somehow in our brains, in our consciousness of what matters, gives that sort of work validity, I think is very skewed and it's very perverse. I think about just art in general and how we value certain artists, you know, and think about all art, all conceptual work that's made into either text or graphic or video or sound. We often want to talk about those people who have left us. And now, because they're gone, they're not producing, and therefore their remnants, their former productions, now increase in value. But you know, that's a market that I never really understood or wanted to be a part of, which I know you're much more adept at talking about than I am. But it kind of makes me think about, well, we started talking earlier, I think, off the recording about Juan Sandoval, probably the most important art collector in the world of brown people's art. We all know, you know, Cheech Marin, Richard Marin, the TV star, the movie star, the comedian, the writer. We know about his collection because of his celebrity. But we don't often talk about people that also collect the same pieces that he collected, and how. And what's one of the things I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to criticize Cheech right now. I love the dude. I respect his craft, but he never talks about why he's collecting the people he collects. And that's a direction I've taken in looking at his personal collection and talking to some of those artists, because I've taken the same approach with the people that Cheech has collected, with my approach with you, and cold calling them and talking to them and understanding, all right, what his motivations were. And I'm going to say this is like, he's missing the boat with you, man.
Thanks, man.
At the same time, I'm like, no, don't let him know, because yeah, because we all know what happens whenever he takes interest, right? But that's one of the perversions I describe as a perversion. One of the problems with identifying art of interest and then talking about it in this kind of platform in the public domain, there's an inherent danger, because are you giving credence where it's necessary? And everything that I learned formally in my educational careers was very skewed and very Eurocentric, non-brown, non-Americas. And when I say Americas, I'm talking about the indigenous population here, not at all, you know, giving credence to any European influence. I'm talking about, where do we begin our focus and how do we ascribe that value here? which matters to me a lot now, and it has nothing to do with popularity. It's great, yes, let's elevate all of our artists. Our artists should not be hustling. I don't like that. And it gets very, very personal at that level with me, as it does with you and everyone that really should matter. But you know, we want success, and we want longevity, and we want these discussions, and we want younger people to be exposed and turned on. And it's just one of these things that I experienced, and just very briefly, my first formal exposure, formal because it was part of an assignment, was back in 1992, and then formalized in 95 when a big exhibit made its way through our town, the Cara exhibit. And then that's when I saw the connections between education and art, and how these people who were not part of that scene got recognized. But who did they get recognized by, and who did they get elevated by? And that's the thing that bothers me, is that it usually takes celebrity to create celebrity, and I've taken issue with that. And so part of this project is to, from a non-celebrity point of view, mine, is to recognize importance, and then hopefully, you know, share that, and then elevate that, because that's where you and so many of our artists need to be from our area. There's no other, I don't think there's any other way to do that. It's not through these Eurocentric approaches to art. It's not through these government-supported grants. Yes, we need those. Give us your money. We need more of that money. Absolutely. But just because that entity is giving this particular artist or piece credit does not validate them. In fact, I would say it does the complete opposite. And so that's one of my goals, is in exposing others to the work that you do, to the importance, the influence, the continuance, the conservation, long term. Again, another topic that you and I talked about off the recording. Those things really matter. I'm looking at the list of questions here, and I think we've kind of, in a way, addressed a lot of these issues. We didn't really get into the deep political stuff, but anyone who knows you, respects you, who has seen, appreciated, and hopefully, you know, acquired some of your work, they understand your politic. And to me, your politic is very reticent, not just on my level, a personal one, but I think now the world knows and recognizes your connection to them, because what you've captured in your work in the past few years does not just speak to the Frontera. It does not just speak to the US of A. It does not just speak to the Americas. It speaks to the world experience of what has happened circa 2016, 2020. And now we're in that reverberation, right? We're dealing with the ripples of that, which you continue to work with. And I'm really excited to see your work progressing, and to moving forward, and to supporting it in every possible way that I can, and influencing others to also do the same. But I guess as kind of a wrap up, is there anything that you want to say as kind of a parting, I guess, I don't know, point as to what your work means in terms of how you deliver it, how you share it with us? Yeah, just, I mean, what it means for you to be a part of this world community, because that's what we are now, especially, in the pandemic, and hopefully coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because well, it's not tough, but it's just how do we get back out? And I don't want to say back out there because the work it was strange, you know, the first 4, 5, 6 months or so was weird because everything was put to a halt. Um, Again, not being able to have my thesis was the first thing, and then, or at least formally in a gallery setting or at the university as it typically would. And you know well that I set my thesis in my front lawn just as I could. Um, because I saw people, I noticed that there was a lot of people walking by, and I figured, well, hell, I'll just have, you know, northwestern Pennsylvanians and northeastern Ohio people like take a look at these kind of highly politically charged pieces. And
You literally set up this display in front of your home. Your artwork was hanging from a thread. I don't even know what you used to hang it from.
I use like I think it was just inch PVC piping and some stakes to like put into the ground. I got, you know, the little elbows and just ran another PVC pipe through the top and just thread. Like I was just thinking of clotheslines and being in a bunch of pop-up shows, and I figured, hell, like we dry print sometimes in clotheslines. So people that don't have drying racks, like I before getting this, I have some uh, not wire, twine thread hanging behind the computer where I would hang them. So I figured, hell, why the hell not? I don't want to just do a Zoom, like a PowerPoint presentation to my graduate committee through Zoom. I still did it, of course, because I had to turn something in, but I set that out there for people to watch. My print professor came and, you know, social distancing, and he took a bunch of pictures, which I actually haven't seen. I never saw them. He never sent me anything. I don't know where the heck, I don't know where they live. Probably just in his camera. Um, and there was people walking by, and, you know, for the most part, ignorant to everything and anything that was on there. They saw the Cholo Escuincle one, and that's the only thing that they kind of gravitated to. Maybe also because, well, there was a few pieces in color, but they gravitated to that because it's like, oh, is that a mouse? Is that a rodent? Is that a groundhog? I think only 2 people actually got that it was like the hairless dog. Um, you know, that's what they called it, the hairless dog. I said, yeah. So, um, so that was the first issue, and now, luckily, like the work had been getting out there through digital galleries, and which is not optimal. Yeah, it's nice that it's circulation, and I mean that is essentially what Instagram and Facebook and your website are. They're just digital galleries. So why not have somebody else put on a digital gallery and then show your work and more people see it? I don't know. It's a weird subject. It's a weird concept. It's a weird construct, and I've been a part of 2 of those. One of our printmaking conferences was that way. Um, you know, they did have all the work physically in a gallery, but nobody could see it except for showing it through, you know, recordings on the phone and put on Facebook, Instagram, and the conference website. So hopefully moving on. I have so much work, like my thesis work, that hasn't been seen here. I would love for that to be seen here somewhere obviously here in El Paso, but somewhere along our Frontera. And then multiple series that I've been working on, and it's just kind of waiting and trying to talk to more people, and again, so people can see the work and appreciate and sort of try and identify themselves with some of these pieces, you know, try and see if they can make a connection, because essentially that's what I'm trying to do. I talk a lot. We talk a lot, both you and I. We talk a lot. So I would like to say that we both like to tell stories, and you're an English major, you're a writer, and you love poetry. That's your type of storytelling. I'm not good at that. I think I'm better at rendering an image, half rendering an image, and telling my stories that way. Um, so I think there's a lot of stories that I'm trying to tell, and we just gotta wait till, you know, sort of pandemic slows down and everybody this might be political too. You know, everybody gets vaccinated. I've got my first dose, waiting on the second. So we can put this together and just have it be accessible to people again. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Still making the work, still producing work. And I have a couple projects in mind too that are, you know, just sort of waiting for things to kind of slow down or pick up. I don't know which one, but there's projects in mind. There's artwork still being produced and stories still being told, and I hope, you know, that keeps going. So I don't think that's gonna stop. It does slow me down a little bit. Certain things do, like just work and daily life, but the work's still being produced. So for those curious, they can also just, you know, cold call me or send me a message. You know,
yeah. How will they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of you, and then they'll get a hold of me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned about your level of work, and again, your humility, and it's one of the things that just for the artists that will be viewing this recording, this interview later, one of the biggest selling points is humility, and that's not because of a personality kind of quirk. It tells me a lot about a person and their work ethic, and what you say about what you do is I would characterize as inadequate, because I don't think you sell yourself enough. Your work is amazing. It's phenomenal.
Maybe that's why I didn't get a job with my first interview. I was too honest. I was too honest. And then talking to people, they're telling me that, they're like, dude, you got to be pretentious and you got to sell yourself. It's like, dude, that's not me. I'm gonna be completely honest and, you know, shoot myself in the foot.
You could ask me about all of my hiring decisions on committees and the people who hire that should not have been. It was always those precocious people. No. They always, I call them, snake oil salesmen. You don't want those people. No, but obviously it's a combination. It's a confluence of your work ethic, your ability to produce a product, your art that speaks about all the ideas that you articulate, and that's the things that I key into. And you can't fabricate that. You cannot fake that. I consider myself to be a really good judge of character, and I've never been wrong about people's characters. You know, knock on wood. So you're one of those individuals that we should be watching very closely and continuing to honor and to support. Not after you've left us, because we've had way too many people leave us, and it's never been a good thing for them or for us. But where was I going with this? I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for the time and the effort that you put forward towards this project, Marcos, and for being willing to share your work with me, with my wife, with our family, allowing us to live with you in our space. It really is an honor, and more people need to have that ability. And so that's one of our ultimate goals, is to share that with everyone, because it really does matter to us. And our view of how we can help our community grow and strengthen really is founded in the arts. And so we attach ourselves to workers, and you're a worker. And people who are workers understand that mentality. Unfortunately, those who are not of that cloth don't really understand that, and so they take a different avenue. We're not concerning ourselves with that. We're concerning with exposing others to what you do. I
think you froze. Oh. Mauricio, did your computer die? You froze? Hello? Oh my god, this is a mess. What? I'm gonna call him.
Hello.
Hey, brother.
Fuck.
You're good, man. I kind of figured your camera, your laptop died, computer died.
Yeah, I need to troubleshoot this.
Mm.
A ver qué me dice ahorita.
Because this thing on my end says, like, your name's still on there. Well, it says Rodríguez Mauricio started recording, and there's still the timer going off. It's still going on.
All right, hold on a sec. I want to try.
There you go. I'm hanging up this now. All right.
Recording has started again. This meeting is being recorded. By joining, you give consent. Okay, dismiss. All right. So okay, I guess yeah. So yeah, we should have gotten all that. I don't know. So I have two computers here that I'm using. One is from the grant for this project, and I was using my bedroom computer, and I didn't think to bring the fucking charger out here. No, but we got all that, man. Hey, I appreciate. Wow, that's almost like 2 hours of conversation that we got down.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. I'm excited. So next step is to have my RA Vanessa to go through this and to do her editing. So she has a lot of experience with blogs, and so she's used to editing, and she has that equipment from her previous project with the other professor. So I'm going to give her the raw footage, and I'm just going to give her some kind of loose constraints to capture, most of your dialogue, focusing on the issues. We didn't do like a 1 through 15 because we kind of organically covered all of those points.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I'm better at that. But yeah, I think that's why definitely the being too fucking honest. Oh, I think it's still recording. Being too honest is, well, that can be edited. Being too honest is definitely why, like, the LA job was like a no. They're like, hey, I got an email later. It's like, thank you, but no thank you. Which is fine, you know?
I hate interviews, man. It's just our HR department and I do not get along at all.
You're still
vale madre. Hold on. Okay, let me. Where is this function? It's over here. Drop that screen. Why do I have that screen? Hold on. Stop